Hello, my name is Liam. I'm 24 and I live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the northern edge of Seattle, the kind of place where the walls are thin and the heat barely works in winter. I work as a plumber and electrician, mostly entry-level stuff, fixing leaks, wiring outlets, whatever the company throws at me. I'm tall and lanky with messy brown hair that I never bother styling, and my hands are always stained with paint or grease from the job. Life's pretty straightforward for me. Wake up early, grab a coffee from the gas station, head to work, come home to a frozen dinner and whatever's on TV. I drive an old Ford pickup that's seen better days, and I don't have much in the way of family or friends dragging me into drama. It's quiet, and that's how I like it. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I never expected anything to change. Not really. But one October afternoon, everything shifted. It was one of those gray Seattle days where the sky looks like it's holding its breath. No rain yet, just a chill wind rustling through the trees, stripping the leaves gold and red. I just wrapped up a brutal job rewiring a kitchen in a rundown duplex, my shirt soaked with sweat and dusted with drywall. My phone buzzed as I was climbing into the truck, a last-minute call from dispatch. Some old house on the outskirts needed the lighting fixed on the third floor. "It's an easy one," the boss said. "Just go check it out before you clock off." The address led me to a secluded spot down a winding driveway lined with tall evergreens. The house was a big, aging Victorian, white paint faded to gray, with gables and a wraparound porch that screamed old money fallen on quieter times. It stood apart from the neighbors, like it had secrets it didn't want to share. I parked, grabbed my toolbox, and knocked. The door opened, and there she was, Elise. She looked about 38 with her hair pulled back in a loose knot, wearing a soft gray cardigan over jeans and no makeup. Her eyes were shadowed like she hadn't slept well in days, and there was this quiet exhaustion in the way she held herself. Not rude, just worn. She didn't smile, just nodded and stepped aside. "Third floor," she said softly, her voice low and steady, like she was conserving energy. She turned and led the way up the stairs without another word. I followed, my boots creaking on the old wooden steps. The house felt heavy inside. High ceilings, faded wallpaper, the faint scent of dust, and something herbal, like lavender candles. We climbed to the top floor and she pushed open a door to what looked like an attic room. It was dimly lit, curtains drawn tight against the afternoon light with only a small desk lamp casting a warm glow. Books stacked on shelves, a few canvases leaning against the wall, and that smell again. Essential oils mixed with old paper. She sat down in a wooden chair by the window, her hands folded in her lap, and stared at the floor. "Close the door," she said. It wasn't a command, more like a plea whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "Please." I hesitated for a second, toolbox still in hand, then reached back and shut it gently. The click echoed a little, and suddenly the room felt sealed off from the world, like we'd stepped into a bubble where nothing else existed. Just the faint hum of the house settling and our breathing. She didn't look at me right away. Her shoulders rose and fell, and when she finally spoke, her voice cracked just a bit. "I'm sorry. I don't have the strength to pretend today." I stood there, frozen. This wasn't the usual client bullshit. No complaints about the bill or hovering while I worked. She looked broken. Not in a dramatic way, but like someone who'd been holding it together for so long that the cracks were finally showing. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying before I arrived. "You don't have to apologize for sitting down," I said, surprising myself with how soft my voice came out. It wasn't some line I'd practiced, it just felt right, like placing a hand on a fresh burn without pressing too hard. Some people stand so long, they forget how to rest. She lifted her head then. Our eyes met across the dim room. Hers were this deep hazel, tired but sharp, like they could see right through the bullshit people usually throw up. For a moment, neither of us moved. No words, no awkward small talk. Just that look, like something unspoken passed between us, a crack in the walls we'd both built. I don't know how long it lasted. Seconds, maybe. But in that quiet, sealed-off space, it felt like the start of something I couldn't name yet. I cleared my throat eventually and got to work on the lighting fixture, checking wires and bulbs while she sat there watching silently. The job was simple. A loose connection in the overhead light. I fixed it quick, the room brightening a little as the main light flicked on. But the whole time I could feel her presence, heavy and real. When I was done, I packed up my tools and headed for the door. She stood up slowly, following me down the stairs without a word. At the front door, she finally spoke again. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little steadier now. "For everything." I nodded, stepping out into the cooling air. "Anytime. If something else acts up, just call." She closed the door behind me and I walked back to my truck, the wind picking up, scattering leaves across the driveway. I climbed in, started the engine, and sat there for a minute, staring at the house. I couldn't shake it. Those eyes, that quiet confession in the closed room. Elise. She wasn't just a client. There was something about her fragility, the way she'd let the mask slip for a stranger like me. I drove home that night with the radio off, replaying it all. Little did I know, that closed door had opened a crack in my own life, and I wanted to see what was on the other side. The next morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand while I was brushing my teeth. Unknown number, but the message was short and unmistakable. "Thank you for yesterday. If you're free, could you check the kitchen light for me? It's flickering again." Elise. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Part of me thought about ignoring it. Just another job, nothing more. But the truth was, I'd barely slept. Replaying that closed room, her quiet confession, the way her eyes had locked on mine like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. I typed back before I could overthink it. "On my way." I showed up less than an hour later, toolbox in hand, telling myself it was professional. The driveway looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more lived in, with a few scattered leaves piled by the steps. She opened the door almost immediately, like she'd been waiting. Same cardigan, but her hair was down today, falling in loose waves around her shoulders. The shadows under her eyes were still there, but she looked a little less fragile. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Her voice was softer than yesterday, almost tentative. "Kitchen's this way." I followed her through the house. The hallway opened into a spacious kitchen that felt like the heart of the place. Big windows letting in the pale October sun, wooden counters worn smooth from years of use, and a long oak table covered in sketchbooks and half-finished canvases. Paint tubes were scattered like forgotten thoughts, brushes soaking in jars of murky water. It was the only room that felt alive, sunlight pouring in and catching dust motes in the air. She motioned to the overhead light. "It's been acting up since last night." I nodded and got to work, climbing onto a stool to check the fixture. It was nothing serious, just a bulb starting to go and some loose wiring from age. As I twisted the screwdriver, I could feel her watching from the table. Not hovering, just present. She filled a kettle and set it on the stove, the click of the burner the only sound for a minute. "Tea?" she asked. "Sure," I said, not looking down yet. "If it's no trouble." She didn't want to impose. "You're already here," she replied, a hint of dry humor in her tone. "Might as well." I finished the repair quicker than expected, the light steady now, casting a warm glow over everything. When I climbed down, she was pouring hot water into 2 mugs, herbal from the smell of it, something earthy and calming. She slid one across the table to me and sat down, wrapping her hands around her own like she needed the warmth. We didn't talk much at first. Just sipped in silence, the kind that wasn't awkward but loaded. I glanced around, my eyes landing on one of the canvases propped against the wall. A woman sitting alone in an empty room, shadows swallowing most of the space around her. It was raw, unfinished, but powerful. "You paint," I said, nodding toward it. It wasn't a question. She followed my gaze and let out a small breath. "I try. It's therapy, I guess. This house was supposed to be full of life once, a place to keep love forever." Her voice trailed off and she stared into her mug. "But now it's just me, wiping dust off memories." I set my tea down, leaning forward a bit. The words came out before I could stop them. "That painting is like you're saying what you can't out loud." She looked up sharply, her eyes meeting mine again. For a second, I thought I'd overstepped. But then her lips curved, not a full smile, but something real, tired, and genuine, like a weight lifting, just a fraction. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Exactly that." The kettle had gone silent and the sun shifted, throwing long shadows across the floor. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger, her hand still trembling slightly. "I've kept my heart locked up for a long time," she said, not looking at me now. "After everything, I thought that was safer. But you didn't try to break in. You just stood there, waiting." I didn't know what to say to that. My chest felt tight, like something was shifting inside me too. "Sometimes that's all it takes, I guess," I managed, not forcing the door. She nodded slowly, finally meeting my eyes again. There was gratitude there, mixed with something deeper, vulnerability she'd probably hidden for years. We sat like that for a while longer, the conversation drifting to safer things. My jobs around town, the way Seattle rain always found a way in through cracks, her old habit of painting at dawn when the light was softest. Nothing heavy, but every word felt like peeling back a layer. When I eventually stood to leave, the sun was lower, painting the kitchen gold. She walked me to the door, her steps quieter than before. "Thank you again, Liam," she said, "for the light. And for listening." "Anytime," I replied, meaning it more than I should have. I drove away that afternoon with the window cracked, letting the cool air hit my face. Elise wasn't just some lonely client in an old house anymore. There was a pull there, quiet but undeniable, a connection that felt like understanding someone else's silence because it mirrored your own. I didn't know what it meant yet, or if it meant anything at all. But for the first time in a long time, I found myself hoping for another flickering light, another excuse to knock on that door. Over the next few weeks, I found excuses to go back. It started small: a loose outlet in the hallway, a dripping faucet in the guest bathroom, a ceiling fan that wobbled just enough to be annoying. Dispatch never questioned it. The house was old, and old houses always need fixing. But we both knew the truth. I wasn't coming for the jobs. I was coming for her. Elise never turned me away. She'd open the door with that same quiet nod, lead me to whatever needed attention, and then, we'd linger. In the kitchen mostly, with tea steaming between us, or sometimes in the living room where the light was better for her painting. We'd talk about everything and nothing. She'd show me her sketches, landscapes from memory, abstract shapes that captured moods better than words ever could. I'd tell her about the jobs that day, the idiots I dealt with, the way fixing things with my hands made the chaos in my head quiet down. She listened like no one else ever had, not judging, not rushing. Just there. One afternoon about a month in, I showed up without a call. I'd baked cinnamon rolls from a mix, nothing fancy, but my mom used to make them when I was a kid, and the smell always felt like home. I figured Elise could use a little of that. She opened the door, surprised but not unhappy, and I held up the Tupperware like a peace offering. "Brought these," I said. "Figured you might be hungry." She took it, peeking under the lid, and her eyes lighting up in a way that hit me square in the chest. "You baked?" "Tried," I admitted, shrugging. "Don't judge if they're terrible." We ended up at the kitchen table again, picking at them warm, crumbs everywhere. She took a bite and closed her eyes for a second, savoring it. "These are good," she said, almost whispering. "Really good." We didn't say much while we ate, just sat there in the sunlight, the kind of silence that feels full instead of empty. Her hand brushed mine once, reaching for another roll, and neither of us pulled away fast. It was small, but it lingered. That's when I said it. The words had been building for days, maybe weeks. "You know," I started, staring at my plate, "you're the first person who's ever made me want to be reliable, like someone worth sticking around for." She set her fork down slowly, her expression shifting. The warmth faded a little, replaced by something cautious. "Liam," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You're 24, you have your whole life ahead of you. You shouldn't put that on someone like me." I looked up, meeting her eyes. "It's not putting anything on you, it's trust. Faith that tomorrow could be better if we're in it together. I'm not asking for promises, I'm just asking if you want me to stay." She didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the edge of the table, and I could see the conflict, the fear of getting hurt again, the weight of years between us. Trust is easy to give, she finally said. Hard to keep when life gets real. I know that, but I'm not scared of real. The room felt heavier after that. We finished the rolls in quieter mood, and when I left that day, she hugged me at the door. Quick but tight, like she was holding on to something slipping. I texted her the next morning. Thinking about you. Coffee later? No reply. I waited all day, checking my phone between jobs. Nothing. The day after, I sent another. Everything okay? Silence. By the end of the week, it was radio silent. I drove by the house once, saw her car in the driveway, curtains drawn like that first day. I even knocked. No answer. The door stayed closed. It hit me harder than I expected. That pull I'd felt, the connection, it wasn't just me. Or maybe it was, and she'd realized the risk was too much. The age thing, her past, whatever walls she'd built back up. I told myself it was for the best. She was right. I was young, dumb, getting in over my head with a woman who'd already lived a lifetime. But it hurt. Like losing something I didn't even know I had. I threw myself into work, taking extra shifts, staying late to avoid the empty apartment. Nights were the worst, lying there, wondering if I'd pushed too far, said too much. If that moment with the cinnamon rolls had been the peak and now it was over, a week stretched into 10 days. I stopped texting, stopped driving by. I figured that was it. She'd close the door again, and this time for good. But deep down, I couldn't shake the hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd find a way to open it one more time. 10 days had passed since that afternoon with the cinnamon rolls. 10 days of nothing. No texts, no calls, no sign of life from the big gray house. I'd stopped hoping around day 7, throwing myself into work to keep my mind off it. Extra shifts, late nights, rewiring basements in the rain, anything to avoid sitting in my apartment replaying her silence. I'd convinced myself it was over before it really started. She was right to pull back. What was I thinking anyway? A 24 and chasing something with a woman who'd already built and lost a whole life? But on the 10th day, in the middle of a job fixing a breaker box in some guy's flooded garage, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello? Liam? Her voice was small, shaky, like she was holding the phone too close. It's Elise? The power's out in the house. Everything went dark an hour ago. I didn't know who else to call. I stood there in the damp garage, water dripping from my boots, heart slamming against my ribs. I'll be there in 20. The sky had opened up by the time I hit the road. Fine Seattle mist turning into steady rain, the kind that soaks through everything. Wipers on full, I gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. Questions flooding my head. Why now? Why me, after ghosting for over a week? Part of me was pissed. She'd shut me out without a word. But mostly I was just relieved to hear her voice. The house looked even more isolated in the downpour, windows black, no porch light to guide the way. I grabbed my flashlight and kit from the truck, splashing up the steps. She opened the door before I could knock, silhouetted against the faint glow of a candle inside. She looked wrecked, pale, hair damp, like she'd been running her hands through it, wrapped in a thin robe that clung a little from the humidity. Her eyes were red again, but this time it felt different, raw, exposed. Come in, she said, stepping back. It's the whole house. Breaker or something? I nodded, shaking rain off my jacket. Probably the main panel. Storm might have tripped it. She led me to the basement door, holding a small flashlight that trembled in her hand. The air downstairs was cool and musty, the beam cutting through the dark as I found the electrical panel. It didn't take long, a blown fuse from overload, easy fix. I replaced it, flipped the breaker, and the lights hummed back to life upstairs. We climbed the stairs in silence. The kitchen lit up warm again. But the atmosphere was anything but. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed tight, staring at the floor. I set my tools down, wiping my hands on a rag. All good now. She nodded but didn't move. The rain pattered against the windows, filling the quiet. I thought you'd forgotten about me, I said finally, the words coming out rougher than I meant. It had been building for days, that hurt, the confusion. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. Forgotten? No, God, no. She took a shaky breath. I was scared, Liam, terrified. You said all those things about trust, about staying, and it felt too good, too real. I've been down that road before, letting someone in, only to watch them realize I'm not worth the complication. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint tears tracking down her cheeks. You think I'd just walk away because of age? Or because life's messy? I think people do, she whispered. They always do. And I needed time to dare to want someone to stay. The words hung there, heavy. I could see it all in her face, the walls cracking, the fear winning for a while. My anger melted, replaced by something fiercer. I didn't go anywhere, I said. I was right here, waiting for the light to come back on. She let out a small, broken laugh, wiping her eyes. You're too good at this, at seeing me. I closed the distance then, reaching for her hand. It was cold, trembling. I'm not good at anything. I'm just here. For you. She looked up, searching my face, and something shifted. The hesitation, the distance, it crumbled. She stepped into me, her arms wrapping around my waist, head pressing against my chest. I held her there, rain still dripping from my hair onto her robe, feeling her breathe me in like she was finally letting go. When she pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes were shining. If you still want to stand outside that door, this time I'll open it first. I didn't wait. I cupped her face and kissed her, soft at first, then deeper, like all the waiting poured out at once. No more barriers, no more excuses. Her hands fisted in my shirt, pulling me closer, and for the first time, the house didn't feel empty. It felt alive. We broke apart eventually, breathless, foreheads touching. She smiled, real, unguarded. Stay, she said. Not a question. I nodded. I'm not going anywhere. Later, after the rain eased and we moved to the living room couch, wrapped in a blanket with the lights low, I pulled a small LED lantern from my kit. The kind that runs on batteries, soft and steady. If you ever need light, I said, setting it on the table, I'll bring it. She laced her fingers through mine. I know. I left eventually late that night, but everything was different. The drive home felt shorter, the rain lighter. We'd crossed the line, no turning back, and I didn't want to. That night in the dark house, with the power out and the storm raging, we'd found our way to each other. And for the first time, the door stayed open. 6 months later, everything felt different, but in the quietest way possible. I wasn't just the guy showing up with a toolbox anymore. I'd enrolled in night classes for electrical engineering, something I'd talked about for years but never done. The classes were tough, crammed between full days on job sites, but they gave me direction, a future I could build with my hands and my head. And Elise, she was blooming in ways I hadn't expected. She'd turned the kitchen into a small studio, hosting painting sessions a couple of times a week for women who'd been through divorces or loss. They came with their stories, their hesitations, and left a little lighter, brushes in hand. I'd come home, home, to the smell of fresh paint and tea brewing, women laughing softly around the table as Elise guided them. She had this gentle way of pulling people out of their shells, the same way she'd pulled me out of mine. We never made a big announcement. No moving trucks, no shared address on paper, but bit by bit, my things found their way into her house. A spare jacket on the hook, my boots by the door, tools in the garage. I'd wake up early, brew coffee for myself and herbal tea for her, the kind she liked with a hint of lavender. She'd wander down in one of my old shirts, hair messy, and we'd sit at the table without saying much, just watching the morning light shift across the walls. It wasn't fireworks. It was steady. Real. Evenings were my favorite. I'd get back from class or a late job and she'd be in the attic room, the one where it all started, working on a canvas. The door was always open now, literally and otherwise. I'd lean in the doorway watching her paint, the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the soft strokes of the brush. She'd look up and smile, that tired but genuine curve of her lips that still hit me every time. One evening, about 6 months in, she called me up there with this quiet excitement in her voice. Come see. I climbed the stairs, the wood creaking under my feet like always. The room was brighter these days, curtains pulled back, lamps on. She stood by the easel, hands clasped, eyes shining. It was the painting from that second day, the woman alone in the empty room. But it wasn't alone anymore. She'd added a second figure, a man standing beside her, not touching, but close enough that the light fell on both of them. The room was filled with soft glow, no shadows swallowing anything. Simple, powerful. "I finished it," she said softly. I stepped closer, throat tight. "It's us." She nodded. "I call it the first time I didn't close the door." I reached for her hand, lacing our fingers. We stood there a long time, just looking at it. The house felt full in a way it hadn't before, not with stuff, but with presence. Later that night, curled up on the couch with the rain tapping the windows again, I turned to her. "If one day you're tired, knees aching, eyes going blurry, will you let me hold your hand through it all?" She looked at me, no hesitation this time. Her hand came up to trace my jaw, soft and sure. "Without you," she whispered, "I wouldn't have the courage to open the door again." I pulled her close, breathing her in, that mix of paint and lavender that was just her. We didn't need rings or vows or labels. What we had was deeper. Two people who'd locked themselves away, afraid of the hurt, finding the strength to let someone else in and staying. Our love didn't have a name. It didn't need one. It was the light in a house that once felt too big and empty. Mornings with tea shared in silence, evenings with stories half told. Nights where the dark didn't scare us anymore because we faced it together. No one else needed to understand. The neighbors might whisper if they noticed my truck there every day. Friends might raise eyebrows at the age thing. But we didn't explain. We just lived. Some days were hard. Old habits die slow, doubts creep in. But we talked them through, no running, no closing doors. That's what it became. A home without locks. A life where showing up was the only promise we needed. And as I look back now, from this quiet place we've built, I know it was worth every crack, every fear, every moment of waiting in the dark. Because in the end, we didn't just find each other. We finally let the light in. And we never closed the door again.